Welcome everyone to another video discussion of free answer writing program by Vajiram and Ravi. In this month, we are going to see GS1, where we will be looking at history questions, society questions and geography questions. Today, 7th, we are going to see questions from history, especially from modern Indian history, from about middle of 18th century until present, significant events, personalities and issue, and freedom struggle, the various stages and important contributors and contribution from different parts of the country. Let us see the overview of those questions. The very first question we have is about Cripps mission and how it diverged from August offer. So we will be talking about different aspects of the proposals of Cripps mission and August offer. Then we have the impact of Subhash Chandra Bose on India's freedom struggle and India's fight for independence. Then next we have current affair question, where we are going to see about the recent re-election of India in the Council of International Maritime Organization. So let us start with very first question. Let's read the very first question together. In what aspects did Cripps mission diverge from the August offer? Now, if you break down the question, you will understand it is asking you to diverge about the ideas which are distinct from one mission offer to compared to other. So in this kind of question, you have to draw a table and compare both offer. For the introduction, you can start with certain timelines, stakeholder involves, etc. So over here, we understand that both the mission, the Cripps mission and August offer were in the backdrop of World War II. Apart from that, you can also write timeline, as in 1940, we got August offer by the Viceroy Linlithgow, and in 1942 we got Cripps mission, right? So you can start with this kind of thing in the introduction. In the body, we will be talking about how there is certain kind of comparison between the Cripps mission and August offer, and in the conclusion you have the opportunity to talk about what kind of success both of the mission achieved and what were the response from leaders, Indian leaders, right? So this is the introduction. You can provide the context. You can talk about the World War II. In 1940, the August offer was proposed when Hitler invaded Belgium. So this was the backdrop of Hitler invaded Belgium. Going fast forward, in 1942, we had Cripps mission. This was on the backdrop of Japan invasion in Indian subcontinent. So this is something you can write in the introduction. Let's go to the body. In the body, we have only one heading, which is talking about key aspects where the Cripps mission diverged from the August offer. You can create a table. You can talk about certain parameters like nature of proposal, dominion status, constituent assembly, provincial autonomy and response from Indian leader, and you can have both of them in the heading. So let's start with the very first, which is nature of proposal. Over here, we do understand that August offer was just intent statement and not a comprehensive one, which was Cripps mission. Also, we have to understand that it was a representative body after the just war which was started, where this was a very specific plan and also gave post-war political structure for the Indian subcontinent. Then we can talk about the dominant status over here. In August, we do understand there was no explicit mention, there was unclear political status, but there were certain inclination towards dominion status. However, in Cripps mission, we can understand there was explicit mention of full dominion status and right to secede from the British Commonwealth. So these are the kind of status that were presented in both the offers and mission. The third, we can talk about the Constituent Assembly. In August offer, there was no clear plan for the Constituent Assembly. However, in the Cripps mission, there was proposal for explicit Constituent Assembly for constitution making for the Indian subcontinent. Then we can talk about the provincial autonomy. Over here, August offer only hinted at elected representative body. Therefore, it was very unclear with respect to the provincial autonomy. Whereas in Cripps mission, there was immediate political changes with greater political autonomy for the provinces. And lastly, there were variety of responses from Indian leader with respect to both the mission. For August offer, we saw that it was met with skepticism as it was vague and lacking concrete proposal. With respect to Cripps mission, it also faced resistance and it was not accepted because there were concerns about different kind of secession, as there were certain kind of provincial autonomy features. Now you have to also understand, you can talk about certain leaders who mentioned certain comments, like for Cripps mission, Mahatma Gandhi mentioned that it was a post-dated check from a failing bank. Now this kind of quotes can also be directly utilized over here in the body part. Now this is something for the body. Let's move on to the conclusion, where you can talk about either similarities for both the offer, as in they were talking about dominion status, whereas the Indian leaders were demanding full independence, as in Swaraj, right, self-rule. So this is the kind of limitation. It was also limited with respect to certain other aspects such as constitution making body, etc. They both failed, and as we have witnessed that how they both had certain kind of comments from the leaders. We talked about how Crisp mission failed, and Gandhiji passed comments with respect to the same as post dated check from a failing bank. So this is something you can write over here. You can also talk about that how both of them failed, and Indian leaders, they started certain kind of movements post that. With respect to August offer, we witnessed individual satyagraha, and with respect to Cripps mission, we witnessed Quit India movement was started post the discussion. So this is something you can add in the conclusion, that how both of those offer were limited and the Indian leaders aspired for full independence. So that is something you can add for the conclusion of question number 1. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. For the introduction, you can talk about certain timeline, you can talk about the backdrop of World War II, right? You can talk about Hitler capturing Belgium, and for Cripps mission, you can talk about Japan invading India. Then in the body part, you can talk about the key aspects of both the mission and how they diverge. You can either make them in the table, or you can create certain kind of structure like this, so that you can explicitly mention all the details. So this is something for the body, and in the conclusion, you can talk about certain similarities as well as the limitation and how they were unable to satisfy the ambitions of nationalists, etc. So this is something for question number 1. Let us start with the question number 2. Let's read the question number 2 together. What impact did Subhash Chandra Bose have on India's fight for independence? How would the country's independence movement have been different without his contribution? So over here we have to talk about the impact of Subhash Chandra Bose's contribution for India's independence, and you have to also talk about how the movement would have been different without his contribution. So over here in the introduction, you can give brief about Subhash Chandra Bose. Then in the body, you can first talk about the impact, and second heading about the nature of independence movement without his contribution. And in the conclusion, you can again reiterate the significance of contribution of Subhash Chandra Bose. So let us start with the introduction. In the introduction, you can give brief about Subhash Chandra Bose. You can start with how in 1921 he was selected as ICS officer. Post that, when he came back to India, he chose to participate in the non-cooperation movement. Now this inspired him to take full participation with respect to India's freedom struggle. So in 1923, he was Chief Executive Officer of Calcutta Municipal Corporation, where Chittaranjan Das was the mayor, and subsequently in 1930, he became mayor of Calcutta Municipal Corporation. You can also go further and talk about that how in 1939, he was selected as president of INC, but due to certain differences, he left. He started a unit of forward bloc within Congress. Then in 1941, he escaped India via Afghanistan, and in 1943, he established INA, and subsequently he died in 1945 due to a plane crash. Now this is something you can talk about in the introduction. You can minimize the information over here, as in you can give certain kind of brief idea what exactly his timeline was, something to give an idea about what kind of significance that he brought for the Indian national movement. In the body, in the heading 1, we will start with the very first demand of the question, which is impact of Subhash Chandra Bose on India's fight for independence. Over here, you have the opportunity to give explicit timeline as well as the nature of contribution that Subhash Chandra Bose has for India's independence. Firstly, he provided political leadership, and there are certain proof points. You can talk about that how he was the leader of all Bengal Young Man Conference. Then he was also president of Indian National Congress. We talked about how in 1939 he was the president. Then you can talk about All India Forward Bloc again, right? Apart from that, when he was mayor of Calcutta Municipal Corporation in 1930, he was also leading All India Trade Union Congress. So these are the kind of leadership roles that he reflected. Second, we can talk about how he brought forward international cooperation. During World War II, he collaborated with Japan and Germany for the fight against colonial rulers and make sure that India is independent with international collaboration. The next is in INA, that how in 1943 he made sure that INA is equipped enough for the independence of India, and subsequently he also created Azad Hind government. So these are the kind of major contribution. You can also talk about that how he helped with respect to women mobilization. You can give example of Rani of Jhansi regiment in INA. So these are the kind of points that you can put forward in the heading 1 of the body. In the heading 2, you can reflect on the same point and create certain kind of correlation where we have to talk about India's national movement without Bose's contribution. Firstly, he gave a lot of emphasis on the role of youth. You can understand how he was leading certain conferences such as All Bengal Young Men's Conferences. He was also subsequently taking various leadership positions with respect to the young members at INC. Then he definitely was one of the foremost proponent with respect to socialism. Along with Nehru, he created a lot of institutional mechanisms to have this kind of philosophy imbibed in the practice of Indian National Congress. Then notion of complete freedom, when the British, they were trying to put forward certain kind of dominion status proposal, he was in favor of complete freedom. And nextly, he was able to create international pressure on colonial government, and that kind of contribution was something which he was solely responsible for, along with many other leaders as well. But he created certain kind of international pressure that definitely impacted India's independence movement. In the conclusion, you have the opportunity of significance of Bose's contribution for freedom struggle. Over here, you can talk about that how whatever kind of structures and bodies that he created, such as INA, right, had a variety of impact. As in, you can talk about that how INA trials, along with Rin mutiny, they impacted the subconscious of Indian masses and united them with respect to fight against the Britishers. So this kind of contribution is also very important. So that is something you can add in the conclusion. And this showcases that the Indian national movement was very much inspired from Subhash Chandra Bose's contribution. So this is something you can talk in question number 2. Now let's see the model answer and understand how can we structure answer for answer writing practice. In the introduction, you can briefly talk about Subhash Chandra Bose and his contribution, as in briefly. Then you can talk about the impact with specific examples, and you can also give other examples which we have already mentioned in the video. Then you can talk about how the independence movement would be different without Bose's contribution. So you can give certain proof point over there as well. And in the last, you can talk about the significance of Subhash Chandra Bose, as in, like, you can talk about the INA trials and Rin mutiny. So these are the kind of things that you can add for the conclusion. Now let's see the question number 3, which is a current affair based question. Let's read the question together. International Maritime Organization, as the global guardian of maritime standards and sustainability, navigates the sea of international cooperation to responsibly shipping for a shared and prosperous future. In this regard, mention the mandate of IMO and significance along with challenges associated with India's re-election to IMO Council. Now this question is very specific about an international body, International Maritime Organization, and we have to understand this with respect to the current affairs, where we have recently witnessed that India was re-elected to the council of IMO. Now IMO has a very specific structure. There is assembly and there is council, and we have different committees underneath the council. Now assembly is the major body, you can understand it as like a legislature, and council is like executive body of the same. So you can understand that how India is now part of the executive body of International Maritime Organization. So that is something you can start with. You can also talk about that there are different categories of membership, such as category A of the council is with respect to those countries who provide services with respect to international maritime, and category B, where India has been selected, is with respect to those who have significant contribution in the international trade. So India has been elected in this body that reflects the nature of intensity of contribution that India provides with respect to the maritime trade. You can talk about importance of sea transport for India as an international trade statistic. You can talk about that 95% of India's trade by value, right, is through seas. This reflects the dependency as well as the nature of magnitude of India's importance for sea transport. So this is something you can start with in the introduction. In the body, you have to write about the mandate, which is a primary demand. You can give certain proof points exactly in 2, 3, maybe 3, 4 points where you will talk about the mandate of IMO. Then in the heading 2, you will talk about the significance of the re-election as well as the challenges associated with the IMO, etc. So that is something you have to structure, and in the conclusion you have the opportunity to talk about the correlation of the IMO Council with respect to India's future goals. So that is something you can add for this thing. The introduction is sorted like this. Let us see the body, where the first heading is mandate of IMO. You can talk about that how the very primary mandate is promotion of safe, secure and environmentally sound shipping, where they are adopting the highest standard of maritime safety and security, as well as ensuring the prevention and control of pollution from ships. So this is the very first primary mandate of IMO. The second mandate is with respect to consideration of legal matters. When there are multiple conflicts with different countries, IMO definitely helps with respect to resolving those conflicts. And thirdly, effective implementation of IMO instruments and standards, as in there are certain kind of codes which have to be implemented when there is maritime navigation involved. So universal and uniform application of those standards. So these are the mandates for IMO. In the heading 2, which is the major demand of this question, we will talk about the significance of India's re-election. The very first significance is international influence and participation. Now India being part of IMO's council, it will definitely help with respect to put their voice and their aspirations over there. It will ensure they have active role in decision making of those standards and implementation of those standards. The second is with respect to the economic and trade implication. We do understand that around 95% of trade by volume and 77% by value of India's trade is based on maritime. So definitely there are certain trade implications. We also have to understand that China, which is having top 7 major ports out of the 10, whereas India is only having 2 out of 40 major. So that shows that India can learn from different countries, and having that kind of active role in the council will help with respect to making sure that India also have certain kind of infrastructure built that way. Thirdly, we can talk about the safety and environmental stewardship. Over here, India can help with respect to contribution to safety and standard and pollution prevention. Also engagement in MARPOL convention. Now this is another convention which deals with maritime pollution. So it definitely helps India by engaging the same. And lastly, it will help with respect to curb marine pollution and its regulations. So these are the kind of significance that you can add for India's re-election at International Maritime Organization Council. So this is something. Then next you have to talk about the challenges associated with the re-election. Now we do understand there are various kind of challenges along with the significance. Let's start with the first, the technological adaptation and innovation. There are certain kind of limitations with respect to the digitalization and autonomous vessel that we have with respect to India's infrastructure, as well as certain kind of technology which is used in the maritime industry. The second is balancing economic interest we have to ensure that our economic growth is also maintained. At the same time, the regulatory compliances are also adhered to. And lastly, environmental sustainability is also maintained along with the trade potential that we are looking for. And thirdly, humanitarian concern in maritime industry, as we have to see the condition, the working condition of seafarers, as well as the issues of human trafficking and piracy. So there are certain challenges involved that India can face, but we do understand that just by getting elected, India has now gotten a voice in an international body which can definitely help with respect to India's interest. In the conclusion, you have the opportunity to talk about way ahead, where we can talk about that how India can leverage their maritime strength with respect to the length of coastal boundary, or we can also talk about the nature of intensity of trade that we are having, which is dependent on maritime. We can leverage this opportunity and augment our maritime strength. You can also talk about that how this is a good opportunity for global collaboration, as well as you can talk about that how it can help with respect to developing of efficient shipping technology and active participation in international maritime governance. You can also talk about that how this is aligned with Amrit Kal Vision 2047 and Maritime Vision. India has been developing various policies as well as implementing various mission with respect to the maritime. So this is aligned with the same, and this can definitely help with respect to India as a leading force in maritime domain. Apart from that, it definitely emphasizes on the sustainability and inclusivity, which can help with respect to the sustainable development goals as well as the climate change, mitigating climate change impact. And lastly, it will help with respect to the economic growth in maritime sector. So this is the conclusion of question number 3. You can select a combination of this to ensure that you have a very holistic answer at the end. Now let's see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. In the introduction, you can talk about the IMO, you can talk about the recent re-election of Indian Council. In the Council, you can talk about the data with respect to the trade. In the mandate, you can either give a paragraph with respect to the mandate or put it in the point form to give a very explicit idea about the mandate. Then in the significance, you can list down the points with keywords and examples to substantiate your answers. And with challenges, again, you can list down the same with examples to support your answers. And lastly, in the conclusion, you can give a way forward type conclusion either in the point form or in the form of paragraph to make sure you have explicitly given a holistic answer for the question. So this is question number 3. You're writing for free answer writing program by Vajiram and Ravi. This month we are going to do GS1, where we're going to see history, geography and society questions. We are writing 5 days a week, which is Monday to Friday. Every day 3 questions, 2 questions on static, 1 question on current affairs. You can attempt those questions at vajiramis.com. Do check out the portal and do upload your answers to maintain discipline, as well as you can understand those questions through model answers over here at vajiramis.com as well as over here in YouTube along with the video discussion. So keep writing and thank you so much.